The rain was hammering against the porch roof when I first heard the sound. Not quite a knock, more like something light tapping the door. I thought it was the wind, but it came again, 3 quick, uneven taps. When I opened the door, the cold night air hit my face, and there it was, a red metal bucket sitting right in the middle of my porch. The kind used for fancy tea tins, with a golden rope handle and faded letters on the side. It looked so out of place under the flickering porch light that I froze for a moment before realizing the bucket was moving. I bent down slowly. Inside, 2 tiny faces stared up at me, wide eyes, wet fur, ears with little tufts at the tips. They didn't meow. They hissed, sharp and dry, like air leaking through a valve. One of them even clicked its teeth at me. I stepped back, startled. They were kittens, or at least I thought they were. But the sound was wrong. The pattern of their fur, too. Not the soft tabby stripes of a house cat, but something wilder, spotted, almost like small jaguar prints. I looked around. No car on the road, no footprints in the rain pooling on the concrete. Just that bucket. Someone had left them there. I grabbed my phone and filmed a short clip, more out of disbelief than anything else. Then I called animal control. A recorded voice told me due to the storm, emergency calls were prioritized for injuries and traffic incidents. It offered a number for the state wildlife hotline. I called that too. Straight to voicemail. The message said, if you find an animal that may be wild, do not touch or feed it. Keep it in a warm, quiet area until an officer can respond. I stood there with rain dripping from my hair, staring at the trembling bucket. Warm, quiet area. That, at least, I could do. I brought the bucket into my entryway. The little ones shrank to one side, hissing softly. I turned on the hallway heater and placed the bucket on a towel. One of them blinked slowly at me. The other pressed its body close to its sibling. They looked exhausted. I didn't dare reach in. I just put a small bowl of water nearby. No food. The voice message had been clear about that. A knock startled me again, this time from next door. Madison, my neighbor, stood there with a raincoat and her little terrier on a leash. Her eyes widened when she saw the bucket. You found kittens? She asked. You can't keep them out here, Logan. My dog can smell them already. I think they might not be regular kittens, I said quietly. She frowned. What do you mean? Stray cats have babies all the time around here. I turned the flashlight on my phone toward the bucket. The light hit their coats, pale brown, with black spots running down the legs and shoulders, short tails with black tips, and those sharp, triangular ears with tiny black tufts. Madison took one step back. Oh my God, she said. Are those lynx? Bobcats. I don't know yet, I admitted. I tried calling wildlife services, but nobody's answering. She shook her head. You can't keep those here. What if the mother comes back? What if she attacks? You should take them to a shelter right now. Shelters don't take wild animals, I said. And I can't just leave them in the rain. Madison pulled her dog closer. Logan, this is a bad idea. Maybe she was right, but leaving them out there felt worse. I moved the bucket to the garage. It was dry, quiet, and I could close the door. I found an old cardboard box, lined it with towels, and carefully tilted the bucket until the 2 small bodies slid into it. They flattened their ears and hissed again, but didn't move to bite. They were too weak for that. I placed a hot water bottle under one corner of the box, wrapped in a cloth, and set a small dish of water nearby. Then I turned off the light, stepped back, and shut the door gently. I couldn't sleep after that. The storm got worse, thunder rolling through the valley, wind rattling the windows. Around midnight, I went back to check. The kittens were curled up together, asleep, their breathing steady. I noticed how their tails were shorter than any cat I'd seen. And those spots, they looked almost painted on. My gut told me I was dealing with something wild. At 2 a.m, I grabbed my outdoor camera and mounted it above the garage door, pointing toward the porch. If someone had left that bucket there, maybe they'd come back. Or maybe the mother would. By 4, the rain slowed to a mist. I was sitting on the couch, half awake, when my phone buzzed. The camera had picked up movement. My heart jumped. I opened the app. The image was grainy, the night vision casting everything in ghostly green. But near the fence line, I saw them. 2 glowing eyes, larger, farther apart than a cat's. The shape moved low and silent. Then a second pair of eyes flashed, closer now, watching the garage. I could make out the outline of pointed ears, the faint shimmer of wet fur. And then it turned, muscular shoulders, a short tail, and it disappeared into the darkness. My hand was shaking when I hit replay. It wasn't a cat. It wasn't a dog. Whatever was out there was bigger. Much bigger. The morning after the storm smelled like wet pine and asphalt. I barely slept, and the first sound I heard was the kittens in the garage shifting against the towels. I checked the camera footage again. The larger shape from last night moved along the fence, paused near the porch, then vanished when a gust of wind slammed the gate. It was not a dog. It was not a house cat. I needed someone who knew what to do. By 8, a state truck rolled to the curb. A woman in a green jacket stepped out with a soft carrier, a clipboard, and a calm expression that said she had seen worse nights. She introduced herself as April, wildlife ranger. I led her to the garage. April crouched by the box, studied the coats, ears, tails, and the way the little bodies stiffened at her presence. She said they are bobcat kittens, a few weeks old, dehydrated but alert. She told me the first plan is always to try a reunite attempt. She explained it like a set of steps. Place the kittens in a ventilated carrier near the spot where they were found, keep them warm, step back far enough for the mother to feel safe, and watch from a distance. If the mother returns within a short window at dusk or dawn, she will carry them off one by one. If she does not, we escalate. Madison appeared before we could move them. She had her terrier tucked under her arm, and a look that said this was already out of hand. She told April this is a neighborhood with kids and small dogs, and that bringing a wild cat to the porch again was asking for trouble. April stayed calm. She explained that a mother bobcat wants nothing to do with people and would only come to retrieve her kittens. Madison said she still did not want it happening near her fence. While they spoke, our other neighbor, a guy named Ben who collects tools and old bikes, wandered over with a coffee. He peered into the garage and told me I could just keep them. He said a friend once raised a raccoon, and it was fine. I told him that is illegal and dangerous, and April added that human contact could ruin the kitten's chances of surviving in the wild. April put on nitrile gloves and asked me to do the same. We moved the kittens into her soft carrier, lined with the towel from my box so their scent would stay with them. She told me to silence my phone, keep movements slow, and avoid talking near the carrier. She set a heating pad under one side so they could choose warmth or cool. She placed the carrier on a low table beneath my porch awning, exactly where the bucket had sat, then wiped the table with pine needles to mask human smell. She tucked the used towel at the entrance as a scent cue for the mother. I asked what to do about the camera. April said to keep it, but angle it higher and switch off the visible indicator light. She handed me a small thermal monocular from her bag and said it would be useful at dusk when the light fades. Around noon, she called a veterinarian she works with, Dr. Harris, and put her on speaker. Dr. Harris asked how the kittens looked, whether they had any nasal discharge, whether their bellies were distended. April answered in steady, clinical words. Dr. Harris said if the mother does not return by dusk, we should reassess. She warned me not to feed them cow's milk or kitten formula, and definitely not meat or tuna from a can. She said human voices and pet smells can cause the mother to hesitate, so the area should be quiet by evening. Madison listened from the sidewalk. She said her dog gets evening zoom eyes and she could not promise quiet. April asked if she could take the dog for a longer walk around dusk and keep the back lights off for a few hours. Madison hesitated, then nodded, still unhappy. Ben said he would keep his garage door down and the radio off. The day stretched into a slow wait. Every hour I checked the kittens through the garage window. They huddled together, eyes half open, breathing even. April told me not to hover and reminded me that the best help sometimes looks like doing almost nothing. She left to respond to another call in a nearby town and said she would be back before sunset. At 5, clouds gathered again but held their rain. I set a folding chair behind the truck in my driveway, far enough back that I could see the porch through the gaps in the shrubs without being obvious. I powered on the thermal monocular and watched the pale gray shapes of fence posts and tree trunks as the evening cooled. Every small sound made me sit up, a squirrel scolding, a jay cutting the air, the distant slam of a dumpster lid. Madison stepped out once to say her back porch light has a motion sensor that she cannot fully disable. I told her I would try to block the beam with a piece of cardboard if it triggered. She thanked me without looking fully convinced. Ben wandered out to say he had put his cat inside. Then he asked again if I was sure I could not keep the kittens. I told him there is a center that can care for them if the reunite fails. He shook his head as if that was a shame and went back in. Just before dusk, April returned with a small kit of scent-neutral wipes and a blanket to drape over the top of the carrier. She said the blanket would make the kittens feel secure, but left the front open so the mother could see and smell them. She checked the heating pad, the towel, the water nearby. She held a small vial to the air and said the wind was light and moving toward the trees. She seemed satisfied. We each took a position. April crouched behind the mailbox. I sat low behind my truck. The street went quiet in that way a neighborhood does when dinner happens all at once. Even the dog across the road stopped barking. 15 minutes passed. Then 20. The light thinned to a soft blue, and the porch lamp clicked on though I had set it to its dimmest. April signaled to switch it off completely. I did. The thermal monocular washed the scene in a dull glow. I saw movement first. A shape gliding along the fence line, halfway between a shadow and a thought. I raised the monocular and the shape popped into a living form, low body, strong shoulders, small head with pointed ears. April whispered that she sees it too. The animal paused beside the trash bin, tested the air, and took 2 cautious steps toward the porch. The kittens gave a faint rasp from inside the carrier. The animal's head snapped up. She waited, then moved closer. I could make out the short tail and the padded walk. She reached the first stair and lowered her head to sniff, nostrils flaring. From the corner house, a porch light flared on as someone opened a door and dumped a bag into a trash can. The bobcat lifted her head, stiffened, and backed down 1 step. April held a palm up without moving, as if calming the whole street. The door shut again. The light stayed on, bright and cold. The bobcat turned her head toward it, eyes glowing like coins in the dark. She crept back to the bottom step, then stopped. Another light flashed, the motion sensor on Madison's porch. The bobcat's ears flattened. She took 2 quick steps backward and disappeared into the hedge to the right of my driveway. I felt my chest drop. April barely breathed. We waited. 3 minutes crawled by. The lights clicked off. The street fell back into a pocket of darkness. The bobcat returned, slower this time, hugging the hedge. She crossed the open stretch with her belly low and her head swiveling. She reached the stairs again and rose on her back legs to sniff the carrier door. 1 paw settled on the step, claws barely visible. Somewhere down the block a car door slammed. The bobcat froze, spun, and loped away with silent power, clearing the neighbor's flower bed in 2 bounds. The kittens rasped once more and went quiet. April exhaled. She moved 1 finger in a small circle to say we should wait a little longer. We did. Another 20 minutes. The bobcat did not return. The air cooled and the streetlights buzzed with tiny insects. April whispered that the attempt is not over yet, and that dawn can also work. She suggested we leave the carrier in place overnight, but keep all lights off and all pets indoors. I nodded. We backed away the way we had come, slow, careful, minimal movement. April wrote notes by the light of her phone and said she would check the thermal footage with me in the morning. At midnight, I woke to the soft buzz of my phone. The porch camera had triggered. I opened the app and saw only the carrier and the swaying shadow of my maple tree. I stared at the screen for a full minute, then another. Nothing. I almost turned over to sleep when the alert buzzed again. This time the camera caught 2 shapes trotting down the street, not cat-like, not graceful. Lean bodies, sharp noses, tails held low. Coyotes. They crossed in front of my house and paused to sniff the curb. One raised its head and looked toward the porch. The other tested the air and moved on. They were gone in seconds, but the sudden spike of fear stayed. I lay awake with one thought growing louder than the crickets outside. We were out of time to be gentle with chance. By morning, the air felt heavy again. April knocked on my door just after sunrise, her jacket dark from dew. She said the decision had been made. The kittens were going to Cedar Ridge Wildlife Rehabilitation Center. The coyotes in the area made another reunite attempt too risky. I felt both relief and guilt, like I was closing a door too soon. April said softly, "Sometimes helping means stepping aside before nature has no chance left." She carried the small carrier to her truck while I followed with a thermos of coffee in silence. The kittens were restless now, pressing against the sides of the carrier, making low rasping sounds. April covered the top with a towel to block the morning light. She asked me to ride along, partly to complete the paperwork, partly because I had been there from the start. I agreed without thinking. We drove out of town under a sky that looked bruised. The wipers squeaked rhythmically as drizzle blurred the windshield. April kept the radio off and the air quiet. When I reached toward the carrier, she stopped me gently. "No petting, no talking to them," she said. "We want them to forget the human part of this story." The drive took nearly an hour, past the hills where mist pooled between pines. The road turned to gravel near a wooden gate with the words Cedar Ridge Wildlife Care Center carved into the arch. Beyond it, Low buildings blended into the trees. A man in a gray hoodie stepped out as we parked. He introduced himself as Evan, the lead rehabilitator. His handshake was firm, his voice quiet, like someone used to working around fragile things. He opened the back of the truck, peered into the carrier, and nodded once. "Bobcats," he said, confirming what we already knew. "They look alert." "That's good." He carried the carrier through a double-door vestibule labeled isolation. Inside, everything smelled faintly of disinfectant and hay. A woman in scrubs, Dr. Harris, was waiting with gloves and a clipboard. She gave April a tired smile, then motioned for us to wait behind the line marked staff only. Dr. Harris spoke through her mask. "Mild dehydration. No fractures. One has a few ticks near the ear, but otherwise healthy." She weighed them quickly, recorded numbers, and placed each into a soft-lined crate. The kittens hissed and flattened their ears, still wild enough to remember who they were. Evan returned after a few minutes with a tablet. He said they'd monitor the kittens for at least 3 weeks before any outside contact. They would be bottle-fed with a specialized milk replacer formulated for wild felines, not kitten formula. No names, no voices, no handling beyond what's necessary. He explained that once they start eating on their own, they'll move to a pre-release enclosure surrounded by natural scents and sounds. I listened and nodded, realizing how far beyond my knowledge this all was. I asked if I could take a short video to update the few people online who had followed my first post. Evan looked uncertain. April said it could help spread awareness, if done right. Dr. Harris agreed but laid down rules. No talking, no faces, no sound. Just a silent clip. Evan led me to a small observation window with a curtain. Behind it, one of the staff members in gloves fed the kittens from a syringe, one at a time. They squirmed and growled softly, all instinct and hunger. The light was gentle, filtered through mesh. I filmed for 15 seconds, then stepped back. Outside, April finished the paperwork. She handed me a copy of the incident report for records and said the footage might help people understand how controlled this process really is. I posted it later that day with a short caption. "They're safe now." No details, no location. Within an hour, the comments flooded in. Half of them praised the rescue. The other half accused me of stealing wild babies from their mother. Some wrote that I should have left them, others that I should have raised them myself. The internet was split between outrage and sympathy, each person certain of their version of compassion. I tried replying to one or two, then stopped. There was no winning that fight. By evening, Evan called to say both kittens had taken formula well and were adjusting fine. He thanked me for bringing them in early, said delay could have caused infection. His tone was steady, professional, but I could tell he cared. He also mentioned something that caught my attention. "If their mother's still around, she'll keep circling her old range for a while," he said. "We track patterns like that to plan safe release zones later. You live close enough to their drop site. Maybe you can help us monitor it." "Monitor how?" I asked. "Trail cameras," he replied. "You already have one, right? If you're willing, we could set up a few near your fence line. Sometimes the mother returns at night. It's valuable data, and it could even guide where her kittens go back one day." I told him yes before he finished. He promised to bring the equipment next week. After the call, I stepped outside. The rain had stopped, leaving the driveway glistening under the streetlight. The red bucket still sat in the garage, rinsed clean but impossible to throw away. For a moment I imagined the forest, quiet, damp, alive, and wondered if the mother was out there searching. I hoped, when the time came, her young would remember the way back without remembering me. A week passed before Evan called again. His voice was calm but urgent. One of the trail cameras near my fence had picked up a large cat, bigger than any domestic animal, limping slightly on its left front leg. The time stamp said 2:30 in the morning. He asked if April could meet me later that day to check the footage and survey the area. I said yes before he finished the sentence. April arrived with 2 new cameras, a GPS tablet, and a thermos of black coffee. We sat in my garage with the laptop open, watching the clip. The cat appeared briefly between 2 pines, her body lean but powerful, tail short, ears sharp. When she turned, the limp was clear. April exhaled through her nose and said, "That's your mother. She made it through the storm, but she's injured." She explained something that stuck with me. Bobcats sometimes leave their kittens near human homes to protect them from coyotes. The scent of people, dogs, and machinery keeps predators away. It's risky but calculated. She probably planned to return once it was safe, until the lights and noise scared her off for good. I felt a weight in my chest. All this time I thought I'd saved them. Maybe she had tried to save them first. We headed into the forest behind my street, following the edge of the ravine where the cat had been seen. The air smelled of damp needles and moss. April showed me how to read tracks, the round pad with no claw marks, the wide spacing between steps. We found a set leading from the creek up to a small clearing dotted with feathers and half-buried bones, the remains of her meals. "She's hunting fine, even with that limp," April said. "That's good news." We installed one camera facing the creek and another near a game trail that cut through a thicket. Evan joined us midway with a cooler of bait, frozen field mice from the rehab center's stock. April said they were approved by the state biologist for limited use to support injured wildlife, not to feed them daily, but to keep them close enough for observation. We placed a few near the creek, careful not to leave human scent. Evan used gloves and covered each spot with pine litter. While setting up the second camera, Madison appeared at the trail entrance, calling my name. I hadn't realized she had followed us. She wore hiking boots and carried a thermos. Her voice trembled slightly when she said she wanted to help. "I keep hearing people online saying she'll attack dogs," she said, "but I just want to make sure she's okay." April thanked her, but reminded her to keep a safe distance. Madison nodded, and for the first time since that first night, I saw that her fear had turned into concern. We marked the new camera positions on the GPS and left quietly, speaking only when we were back near the truck. That night I checked the live feed from the new cameras. The forest shimmered in shades of gray. Owls moved like drifting smoke. Around midnight, the injured bobcat appeared again. She sniffed the bait, ate 2 mice, then sat for several minutes looking toward the direction of my house. She seemed cautious but steady. I saved the footage and sent it to April and Evan. They both responded within minutes with the same 2 words, "She's alive." 2 days later, one of the cameras went offline. I thought it was a dead battery, but April insisted we check it. We drove out early, taking the dirt road until it narrowed into a footpath. When we reached the spot, the camera mount was ripped from the tree. The strap had been cut cleanly, not torn, but sliced. Nearby, fresh boot prints pressed into the mud. Not April's, not mine. Someone else had been there. April crouched, tracing the edges with her glove. "This isn't an animal," she said quietly. "It's human. Maybe a trapper." She pulled out her phone and marked the coordinates for the game warden. Her jaw tightened as she spoke. Unauthorized hunting was rare, but not unheard of. Injured predators made easy targets. By evening, word had spread through the neighborhood. Ben came over swearing he heard gunshots near the ravine last night. Madison called the sheriff's office herself. The calm we had built cracked. For the first time, people worried not about the bobcat attacking them, but about someone hunting her. That night, I received an email from Evan with a short video attached. It was from the rehab center's internal feed. The kittens were older now, bigger, alert, moving with more strength. A caretaker, wearing gloves and a mask, offered food with long tongs. The kittens hissed, spat, and swiped before eating. They didn't approach the human. They didn't show trust. Evan wrote below the clip, "Exactly what we want. They're remembering what they are." Dr. Harris joined the next group call with us. Her voice was calm, almost clinical. She said both kittens were gaining weight steadily. If progress continued, they would be candidates for a soft release in 2 to 3 weeks, right here in the same forest, assuming the area remained safe. April said that depended on catching whoever was tampering with the cameras. Before we ended the call, Dr. Harris added something that stayed with me. "Rehabilitation works best when people respect the distance between love and control," she said. "You gave them a start, now we give them back what you couldn't, the wild." That night, I stood on my porch with the empty red bucket at my feet. Somewhere beyond the trees, the injured mother moved under a half moon. Somewhere behind locked doors, her young were learning to survive. And between them, between all of us, was that thin, fragile line that people always cross when they care too much or not enough. 2 months passed. The air had changed. Summer was folding into early fall. Mornings came with fog thick enough to hide the ridge, and the forest smelled of damp leaves and cedar. Evan called just after sunrise. The kittens had reached their release weight. They were strong, lean, and aggressive enough to hunt small prey in controlled conditions. It was time. He asked if I wanted to be there. I said yes before he finished. April met me at the trailhead, her truck already loaded with a collapsible transport cage, gloves, and the required paperwork. Madison showed up too, holding 2 paper cups of coffee and a nervous smile. Ben followed later with his camera, but promised not to post anything until the center approved. We parked near the edge of the forest where the dirt road turned to soft earth. The sky was still pale, streaked with silver. Evan arrived with another vehicle, the logo of Cedar Ridge on the side. He opened the back carefully, and there they were, 2 young bobcats, larger now, their coats darker and thicker. They pressed against the wire of the enclosure, ears twitching, eyes bright and cold. They didn't make a sound. April went over the release plan. "We call this a soft release," she said. "We open the enclosure and let them leave at their pace. No talking, no clapping, no noise. They decide when to step into the wild." She looked at me. "You ready?" I nodded and reached into the truck bed. Inside a cardboard box sat the red metal bucket, the same one from that first night, polished clean, the rope handle frayed. I carried it down to the path and set it beside a fallen log near the release site. Empty, silent, a small reminder of how this all began. Evan gave a quiet signal, and 2 staff members lifted the transport crate into position. They faced it toward a narrow corridor between trees that opened into thicker brush. The air was cool and still. No wind, no sound except for the distant drip of water from the branches. Evan unlatched the door and stepped back. The rest of us held our breath. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then one of the young bobcats stretched forward, its head low, testing the air. The second pushed behind it, impatient. Together they moved to the threshold. Their paws touched the soil. One blinked at the sudden light filtering through the fog, then slipped into the undergrowth. The other followed, silent as a shadow. They didn't run. They didn't look lost. They simply melted into the forest that had been theirs all along. We stood there long after they vanished. April finally exhaled and said, "That's what success looks like, not gratitude, not recognition, just absence." Madison brushed her sleeve across her eyes. Even Ben stayed quiet, his camera still in his hands. Evan closed the empty crate and carried it back to the truck. Before he left, he handed me a small envelope. Inside was a flash drive. "Footage from the rehab center," he said. "Thought you might want to see the middle part you missed." Back home, I watched the clips that evening. The 2 kittens playing in the grass enclosure, stalking a feather lure, swatting at insects. One climbed a log and hissed at the camera. They were untamed, beautiful, and whole. I turned off the screen and sat in the dim light of the garage. The red bucket leaned against the wall beside me, catching the last gold line of sunset. 2 days later, the trail cameras picked up movement near the ridge. 3 shapes this time, 1 adult bobcat with a distinctive limp, and 2 smaller forms moving behind her. They traveled along the creek, then vanished into the trees. I watched the clip 5 times, heart pounding. April confirmed it later that night. The family was reunited, no doubt. Word spread through the neighborhood again, but this time it wasn't fear or gossip. Madison organized a cleanup along the tree line, and people showed up with gloves and trash bags. Ben made a small wooden sign that read, "If you find wild young, step back. Their mother may be closer than you think." It stood near the edge of the trail where the red bucket once sat. When everything was done, I took the bucket home. I wiped off the dirt and placed it on a high shelf in the garage. Not as a trophy, not as a memory I needed to show anyone, just as a reminder of what it meant to help without ownership. Sometimes, helping means walking away at the right moment. Sometimes, it means trusting that wild things know their way better than we do. The forest stayed quiet that evening, except for one faint sound beyond the trees, a short, low rasp carried by the wind. I couldn't tell if it was real or imagined. Either way, it was enough.